We are in the month of Nisan, the first month of the months of the years. Jewish people are unusual people. Most people, when they have a calendar, they have just one calendar. Well, our calendar is we don't go merely by the seasons of the year, 365 days divided into 12 months, 30, 31 days approximately, except for February. What do? We go by a yearly calendar that the first day of the year is Rosh Hashanah. But we also go by the first month of the year is not Rosh Hashanah. It's actually the seventh month. The first month is this month, the month of Nisan. It's the beginning of a new cycle. So what gives? What's going on? Why do we have the beginning of the year and the beginning of the months? Because when God created the world, he gave to the humanity a world that he created in 6 days and 7 day he rests, 7 days, which is the idea of nature. And the natural way of the world is the natural cycle of the sun, natural cycle of the sun that goes for 365 days in a quarter. And that's nature that God creates. But then God says, he says to Jewish people, when they're in Egypt still, that this is your month. He adds something to the Jewish people. And it's based on Chodesh. Chodesh means month, but it comes from Chidush, which means new, right? Because the moon renews itself every month. So there's a renewal process. There's a chidush. There's some novelty that's given to the Jewish people. And that novelty is that we're not bound by nature. That novelty is that we rise beyond the nature of the world the way God created it in 7 days. We are redeemed out of Egypt. Egypt in Hebrew is Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim comes from the words Meitzar, means limitations. We all have natural limitations, human limitations, even goodly and holy limitations, but they're limitations. Given to the Jewish people, you can rise above the human condition and your limitations. So this is the month we find ourselves now, and therefore it's the month of redemption. When we first got redeemed out of Egypt, it'll be the final redemption of Mashiach, apropos time for it right now. May we all be redeemed. And when we are redeemed, it's not just the Jewish people, but for the Jewish people, we will be redeemed. All of humanity will live in a world of good, of godliness. As we will perceive godliness, therefore we won't be greedy. And therefore there won't be wars. Therefore there won't be the pain and suffering that we go through now. So in preparation for that, guess what we do? We learn Tanya. Tanya was given as a prep for the final redemption. Tanya was given because the world is dark, so we need a greater light to illuminate the world. And it also was given not only to illuminate the dark world, but to prepare the world, the final redemption. Final redemption through Mashiach, through the Redeemer. And that's what we are here. Welcome to Tanya Today. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zurich and Kadeshim in Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. We are in chapter 38. In this chapter, we're adding a new dimension to what we learned, chapters 35, 36, and 37, that through our service, through our divine service, we will bring about the final redemption. It's in our hands. God has given it to us. Through our divine service, our actions, specifically actions that we take in this world, of mitzvahs that are done with a physical object, that we transform not only ourselves, but the physical, and not just the physical object, but everything that comes to help to do the mitzvah. The car that you drove today to come to shul, right? The food that you ate to give you strength to study is all elevated, but that's all in the act. Now, in this chapter, we're going into, and slowly we're approaching kavana, intent, mindfulness, right? That's a big thing out there. Well, the big news is that the act itself is, without mindfulness, is a connection. When it's God's mitzvah, his thing that we do, we are connected, period, with God. Now where does intent, where does kavana, where does intentionality come into play with all of what we've been speaking? So we're going slowly through this. What we did explain previously is that, of course, there's a greater, God animates everything into being. This paper cup is inanimate. It's inanimate. God creates it, something from nothing right now. Me, also he creates. You, something from nothing. But we've got more life in us than the paper cup, right? So this will be the background that we need, which we're only going to start the process, but not complete it yet, of explaining the uniqueness of kavanah, of intent, mindfulness, the spiritual component of the mitzvah. But let's understand, a body versus a soul, right? A body is a piece of meat. A soul is, right? This is inanimate compared to this, me, right? Or any of us. However, they equally concealed godliness. You don't look at a cup, you say, oh, God. Godliness is here. You don't say that. You don't look at a person and say that either, by the way. Maybe if they're acting in a godly way, then you'll say it. But not when you look at a person. Oh, godliness is, no. You know why? Because everything of creation, whether it's a body, whether it's a soul, right? They equally conceal the countenance, the inner aspect of the divine. You look at a person, you don't, oh, God's animating you. Here, like, looking at Menachem Hill right now, oh, God's animating you. But when I look at the cup, God's not animating it. No. I don't see, it's concealed from me that God's animating this cup, and concealed from me that God's animating you. Equally, no difference, right? The breath of God that's in us, that gives us life, action, not just life, literally existence, that we are. Not the quality of life, but that we are. God's countenance is concealed. So that's called Hester in Hebrew. Hester meaning concealment, right? So when God, he brings himself into this world through a series of profound tzimtzumim and Whether it's a permitted thing of klipas noiga or even impure thing, God is completely concealed. Nevertheless, the godly illumination, meaning the flow of vitality that God illuminates and gives life to, right, by the way of a garment called klipas noiga, it's not the same at all when it comes to contraction, tzimtzum. The tzimtzum, the contraction, there's a difference. There's a greater contraction on the light, and that makes what? A greater contraction on light makes what? The most contracted thing, inanimate object. Less of a contraction makes, right? A tree that has roots and it grows, it's not inanimate. This grows to it. Less contraction, an animal. And less contraction than a human being. So we have concealment and contraction, hester and tzimtzum. So the metaphor for this to appreciate the difference is when it comes to concealment, so that's like putting up a curtain in your window. Every house has a curtain, so the light of the sun is concealed, right? And equally concealed because everybody has a curtain. It's a similar curtain for every house. So it's a similar reduction of the light that comes through into the house. But it's all concealing the sun, the rays of the light of the sun, equally. But then you have something called contraction. Contraction means contracting the light. So that would be like taking a piece of plywood. Let's say you have a curtain, but you also have a piece of plywood, and you drill a hole. So if you drill a very small hole, you get a very small light, right? Guess what that makes? Inanimate. Make a bigger hole, more light comes through. It's still contracted because you still have the board, right? You still have the curtain that's concealing, you still have the board, but it's more light coming through. That makes, let us say, the animal. Even more of a hole in this board that's boarding up the window. So less contraction, making more, right? That's this to appreciate the difference between hester, concealment, the curtain, versus tzimtzum, contraction, the board that is contracting, that has a minimal hole or a maximum hole that is contracting the light. So that's the thought for today. Where we're going to go with this is, of course, we can now get an idea of where we're going with this and how that is what's the word I'm looking for? The act of, God within creation, concealing and contracting in order that there should, right? So we're going to see the difference between something that's not as contracted, this is more life. And that's all going to tie in with kavana, intent, mindfulness. Okay, any questions? It's a short class today.
This is the Hebrew term for concealment.
Hester.
Okay. Hester.
And tzimtzum, exactly. All right. Oh, Lisa has a question. Who controls the size of the hole? God Almighty. He controls because he's the one who is concealing upon himself, who is contracting upon himself. So God Almighty is in control of that, as that's God within creation. Thank you, Lisa, for the question.
Is the opposite of contraction the portion of that God reveals of himself, diminishing or growing?
Yeah.
Portion of what God reveals of himself?
Yeah. All right, folks, Rambam's coming up. Rabbi Ronnie Fine coming to you from Chabad Zurich and Kadesh, Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. Have an amazing